you started with one thing, correct? With supply chain and kind of working your way up first before you added so many different facets, or no?
No,
Really?
I
Always?
wouldn't say that.
Wow.
No, for me, again, I've always been look, any entrepreneur, any strong entrepreneur understands the power of the shotgun approach instead of the single bullet approach. Why? Because you just don't really know what's going to stick unless you try a lot of different things. And even if you may have something that's a bit successful, maybe there's something else that's even more successful. And I don't even mean successful from a monetary standpoint. I mean from a fulfillment standpoint, from an impact standpoint, really any of these aspects. So, I've always been a person, as I mentioned before, who does a lot of different things, trying to through that journey find ultimately what may be my true path to give me the highest level of fulfillment and the highest level of impact. For me, supply chain was a consolidation of probably 10 years of different kinds of experiences that then led me to it. It was never that I woke up one day and said, "Hey, let me be a supply chain person." I had previously been in the entertainment industry. I was a consultant. I was in the financial markets. I was in the regulatory space. And I was always an international mindset, an international business type of person, well traveled, spoke many languages, understood differences of culture. And it's this perfect storm of all of those things that came together to basically create a manual for me where there was no manual. It was not something I studied in school or trained upon, and it just lended itself to me. But I was smart enough, I think, to one, find the hole in the market that needed the things that we did, and two, recognize that my skills and talents that I built up in multiple different places came together to give me a uniqueness to the way that I could provide solutions.
Mm,
And so, definitely not a single path type of thing. No.
yeah. I definitely resonate with the idea of the shotgun approach, but I'd love to dive a little bit into this because it almost seems contradictory to top ideas like the one thing, right? Where it's focus on one and go all in on one thing, one focus. But I'd love to kind of, maybe extrapolate on this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I believe in going all in after you feel as though you have sort of found what you really think is going to be your true path. And how do you do that? Well, you have to try a bunch of things. And if you go all in on every one of those things, then you'll never really get to the place that you've had a multitude of experiences because you've just been one sided. You've been too singularly focused. So I believe that there's a time in our lives where all of us need to consistently try different things until we feel as though we've found our path and our way. Now, by the same token, I think that there's the difference between being a born leader or a built leader. So we build with a certain level of like intention to get us to a place that we think is right. But ultimately, what we're really seeking is we're trying to seek to figure out what we were born to do. And that aha moment could come for you at different parts of your life. It may even come when you've hit your highest level of achievement, where you look around and say, I really don't want to be here. I
Mm,
actually want to be over there. But it's only from that vantage point or that perspective because you tried different things and you went to the top of a mountain of something that you thought was where you wanted to go that you realize that your real aha moment or your real destiny or purposeful what you want to do of purpose is something else that could come to you in your 20s 30s 40s even at 70 years old. You could sit around and say, you know what, I don't want to live a life of regrets. I want to make sure that I do these things that I always wanted to do. I have a good friend of my father's who's a physician, who was and wanted to be a physician because his dad was a physician and his dad's dad was a physician and so on, and went down that path and was a very successful physician for the good 20, 30 years, had kids, raised them, everything else, but always was an artist, always was a painter. That's what he wanted to do his entire life. And so in his mid to late 40s or 50s, whatever, when the kids were sort of done, he said, you know what? I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. I've fulfilled my obligations to my family, to myself, to, society in many ways. Now it's time for me to do what my true purpose was, and became a painter and an artist, and continue going down that path. I think all of us need to consistently look for the different things until we find the thing, and be brave enough to realize that that's the thing, and then you can go all.
What would you say is a key marker for knowing if it's a thing? Is it intuition, feeling?
I think that it comes down to what makes you fulfilled from a very fundamental standpoint. So fulfillment could come through, the experience that you provide to others. It could be through feeling as though no 2 days are the same, or that you wake up with a sense of purpose every single day and you never get tired of it. That you feel as though it's your way that you're going to leave a mark for yourself or for society. Or just in the most simple facet, it just makes you feel good. It just makes you feel good to do that thing, and that feel good could come from it being a challenge for you, or exciting, or innovative, or breaking new ground, or whatever you want to call it. But whatever it is, it gives you a feel good. It gives you that idea of feeling good. And if you can have that feeling, and you'll want to embrace it more, and gravitate towards it more. And so that's really what I think gives you that idea of what's right for you.
Mm. It also sounds like fulfillment is close to the idea of the human needs. Like Tony Robbins has the six human needs.
Mhm.
And oftentimes in our three circles of life of work, self, and relationships, we might miss put a need somewhere else, right? So, for example, a lot of people will put significance through work when really they wanted significance in a relationship because they're lonely
Right. Right.
or alone, things like that. So I think you're right. I think fulfillment is maybe fundamentally getting that human need that through work specifically.
It could be through work, or it could be through family, or it could be
Mm,
through anything. I mean, I think the point is that there's a big difference between achievement and fulfillment.
mm,
Achievement is that you set out some goals, you went to meet them, you worked hard at it, or didn't work hard at it, however it came to you, and you felt as though you had an achievement. But achievement doesn't necessarily mean that it fulfills you. It could partially fulfill you, but true fulfillment is when you can sit alone and understand that what you're doing truly resonates with you in your heart, and that you really are where you need to be with things. And the other one that ends up flowing into this as well is the idea of dreams. So it's like there's achievements, there's dreams, there's goals, and there's fulfillment. And I kind of feel like achievement, dreams, and goals all kind of flow together in a particular kind of arena, but fulfillment kind of lives alone, and it is fed through those either goals on daily, weekly, monthly basis, the achievement of a particular dream that then brings you levels of fulfillment, or achievement again. But fulfillment is really what it is that we need to look for. And that could be on the most simple things, like just having a good conversation. That could
mm.
be that could be your fulfillment. It could be in producing that piece of music. It could be in traveling, meeting new people, relationships, a new, business venture. Whatever it is, fulfillment is where I think our focus needs to be.
Yeah. Personally, I think I would add maybe even identity to that portion of feeding into fulfillment because and I've experienced this myself is that, dissonance between who you trying to be or want to be versus who you are today or like that story with your dad's friend being a doctor but his identity has always wanted to be a creative, an artist, right? So I think maybe even identity feeds into fulfillment.
Yeah, I'd actually almost go the other way around, meaning
Really?
that as you seek fulfillment, you end up developing more of your identity. Because as you work towards being more fulfilled in the things that you do, you then start to realize more and more of who you are. So I kind of find it can go both ways in many ways, but that's at least the way that I'm built. As I continue to seek different areas of fulfillment in my life, I start to identify who I am and my character of who I am more and more. So let's just say, for example, that I want to be very fulfilled with my family and being a father. So I spend more and more time with my kids and I do more and more experiences and I'm more engaged in their lives. And in the end of the day, I have fulfilled an identity of who I am, but it started with the fundamental of what I thought would be making me fulfilled, which would be to be a good father. So
Eh,
this is how I feel like the identity is then created from the identification of what your fulfillment triggers may be.
I really like that. I think that's very interesting because oftentimes we start with, like, for example, Atomic Habits or books as such, talk about identity first. And it makes sense, especially if you've never thought about, what kind of identity do I want? I want to be a good father. I want to be an athlete, right? But after that's been established, it makes more sense to kind of put it in the back burner because it's at that point a byproduct of the actions you do to be fulfilled towards that identity.
Yeah, because if you go identity first, you stop evolution.
Mm.
This is what I believe. I believe that we're consistently evolving as people and our ideas of fulfillment change as we have different experiences in this life. And that's okay because as our different levels of fulfillment change and we move towards those, we gain additional facets to who we are and our identity of what it could be. So to say that it's identity first and then work towards fulfillment cuts off the idea that you could be different people. You could be different things. And we are different people. I mean, who you are as a kid versus who you are as a teenager and a young adult and later on in life and then as an elderly person, those are five different people. And a lot of that is geared by what made you fulfilled and motivated at those different points in your life that then created those things, you know? So
Yeah,
I kind of feel like it's a consistent evolution rather than a, identity first mentality. At least for me it is.
right. I like that because I think it's a good way to work backwards if you need clarity, right? To kind of think of an identity and go towards your dreams and goals. But like we said, after that, it should be on the back burner because your identity changes. I mean,
Yeah.
which phase you're in life, what you're doing, all those things.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I would say that. I mean, I'd rather be the chameleon, the one that's always changing my colors based upon the different environments that I'm interacting within. Am I still, and how that's going to change through time?
What would you say is the greatest sense of unfulfillment for a person?
Unfulfillment
Yeah.
um, would be uh, would be dreams that are unfulfilled. So basically, regrets. I think regrets are a big one, saying, "I wish I had more time," or "I wish I could have done these things." I mean, we have a ticking clock while we're here, and that's not meant to be morbid. That's meant to be a carpe diem motivating ideology to say that with the time that we have, we better make sure that we're doing the best that we can for ourselves, for others, and basically always feel as though we're seeking a level of fulfillment. It's a bit of a hedonistic mentality in many ways. It's almost selfish in some ways, but the reality of it is that unless you're fulfilled, you can't be truly your most happy and therefore probably your most effective self, right? Because if you walk around all day knowing that, you're not achieving the things you want to achieve in this life or fulfilling those inner goals or needs or desires, you're going to be an ineffective person. You're either going to be very outwardly angry or upset, and that's going to then reverberate into your relationships, either work or professional or personal. And so I really think that that's the important side.
Yeah, I agree. I think the gift of life is often glossed over, right? There's so many things day to day. Bombarded by tasks and notifications nowadays with social media and phones, but truly the gift of life is still kind of unfathomable. So to waste it feeling unfulfilled would be a huge regret.
Especially if you have the capabilities to be fulfilled. It's one thing to say that you're born into particular circumstances where it's difficult or there are more obstacles to get you to places of fulfillment. But if that's not the case for you, then you're doing a disservice not only to yourself, but the rest of society who can't even have the opportunity to try to be fulfilled, right? First world problems, whatever you want to call it. You know what I mean? And so, we tend to hyper analyze our own lives, where really in the end of the day, if we just look at it and say, these are things that make me happy. As long as I'm doing these things, everything else is going to kind of flow from there. And at least I know that in the worst case scenario, I'll be happy. That's a pretty good outcome.
Yeah, that was basically something similar when I switched out of medicine halfway through to becoming a doctor. For me, I wasn't even entirely sure at that time how to put it all in words, but I just knew that I could see this being not fulfilling for me at the end of the road. Ultimately, I knew I could always go back to becoming, would be hard, of course, but I could go back and study and be a doctor to later if I wanted to, versus getting my 20s back, experimenting and trying new things like the shotgun approach. I wouldn't be able to do, right? And I don't know what it's like, but I anticipate it being harder with kids and a wife and family, these things. So I really thought, okay, well, one seems easier than the other to get back. So that's kind of how I went with it.
Yeah, no, and that's a really big step you took. I had the same pathway.
Really.
I went to school. I went to Wash U in St. Louis,
But yeah.
and I went down there for undergraduate to do medicine. And I had my father and my grandfathers that were doctors and all this kind of thing. And because I loved science and I loved anatomy and biology and all these things, but I didn't want to be a doctor. I did not want to do that, not because of maybe selfishness or otherwise, but it just was not the profession I wanted to go down. I appreciated the science of it and so forth, but and I still to this day have that mindset in many ways, but I was not going to go down that road. And it was a challenge, for sure. And I shifted to business, which was much more suited to me and everything else. And but yeah, I get it. I know what that's like to make those pivots and those changes.
Was there any event, course, job in your life that you did or took that unexpectedly helped you in life?
That helped me in my life.
Yeah.
Um, a job that I took that was unexpected that helped me in my life. Yes. So it wasn't the job itself, it was what happened in the job. So I was working when I first graduated from college. I started a dot com. That was my first job out of college. I ran that for about a year and a half, 2 years. It sort of imploded. And then I moved to New York and I worked for the second largest online advertisement company in the world at the time, which was called 24/7 Media. It was in the early 2000s and it was before the whole dot com sort of like bust happened. And what was interesting about the job was from the day I went in there, and I was only there for a little less than a year, there were 7 rounds of cuts. And every day you went in there not knowing if it was gonna be you that day. And I remember I went in on a particular day, and the boss, the manager had called the entire department into the office and was like, "Hey, listen, the whole department's being let go today. There are boxes in the hall. You have until 4 p.m. to clear your stuff out. You have to sign this piece of paper to get severance, blah, 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 blah. Well, that was tough because I had never experienced anything like that before. And it wasn't a scenario of that I wasn't good at my job because I knew I was, and others on the team were good, good, good. What it was the realization that numbers don't, that people don't matter in some aspects of business when numbers are involved. And for some reason, our department didn't make sense. It didn't make sense to the bottom line anymore. It didn't make sense as a business unit, whatever you want to call it. And so because of it, it didn't matter what we were going to do. It just didn't make sense dollars and cents. And companies have to make those kinds of decisions sometimes. And that experience taught me that I needed to know more about why numbers matter and what actually I should be focused in on or looking at when it comes to business and the financial side, because you always want to be on the right side of the numbers. Because I didn't want to feel that experience ever again.
Mm.
Right. That experience also pushed me. I was already an entrepreneur, but also pushed me to the idea that I wanted to, run my own companies as well, because I never wanted to be in a place where one day I'd walk in and someone would hand me a pink slip. I'd rather just have my own company and say, hey, you know what, I'm closing it on my own free will. Right.
Right.
So that was a good experience.
Yeah. So
Everybody should get paid off in their life.
when you say the right side of the numbers or numbers matter, are you talking about metrics or finances?
Finances, financials, particularly when you're looking, I mean, metrics too, but I'm talking about that when it comes to business, there's a place where people stop mattering because numbers have to triumph. Otherwise, the business doesn't exist
Mm.
anymore and you can't support people. And that's hard to see when you're on the inside, when the numbers are impacting your job security or your life or your ability to pay rent. It's hard to understand that and to see that. I needed to understand those things. So that's when I ended up leaving kind of the world, corporate world, and going and getting a master's degree, an MBA in finance and business law, and started focusing more on kind of, CFO and kind of, financial management activities and the importance of financials and projections and resources and labor and all this kind of stuff to just really
Mm.
kind of get more of a sense. So
Mhm.
I got accelerated education in this.
Right. So you basically uh started learning more about money, the relationship with money in business and how it impacts, work performance, layoffs and all sorts of
Sure,
things, correct?
organizational structures,
Mhm.
like the way organized with the way companies are organized and when they have to make tough decisions, why?
Yeah. This was in your 20s?
That was around, that was in my mid early to mid 20s.
And did that education with finances start to also affect your personal finances and improvements or
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Because when you start looking at things with that kind of a lens, you then tend to take that lens to other parts of your life. Start to say, oh, you know what? Dollars and cents really matter. And if you do this,
Mhm.
then you can save to then do these things, just like a business can save on doing this so that they don't have to like lay off an office or so that they can expand a company or whatever it may be.
Anything in particular for any advice on personal finances that you learned over those years?
Yes, you need to consistently be looking at how you can get yourself to be financially free and get away from living paycheck to paycheck or worst case scenario credit card debts, like debts, because those are all handcuffs. They're seen as like immediate sort of get me what I need or want today, but we don't look downstream enough to realize that that's a challenge. Like if you have the ability to buy a house today, right? Or to take on a 30-year mortgage and you had the ability to pay that cash or not pay that cash. Well, that's a decision that you may want to look at, quite strongly because on one side, if you pay for the house in full today, you probably saved about a 25% premium that you're going to pay over 30 years for that house. But at the same time, the way that we've been raised and taught in America is that we're a debt culture. So instead, what you want to do is cash is king, put down as little as we can, then take that capital and invest it over 30 years. And so you're basically playing with other people's money. There's a cost to doing that. And unless you have a savvy sort of like investment plan as to how you're going to take those saved amounts and grow them through time, then that's not a good plan. It just depends upon who you are and how comfortable you are around sort of numbers and investing and sort of building up those kinds of futures for yourself.
And me being in my 20s, a recent aha moment or big realization I had was understanding the relationship of money and habits and how it's very closely tied together. For example, way you like the what you spend your money on and where you spend it, right, is very important. And if you're not very conscious of your habits, or for example, let's say somebody likes to go to happy hour after work and they don't see it as an issue, but they're not saving enough and they don't feel as good energy wise and all these things, you start to realize the underlying thing isn't I need more money, it's you need better habits. Sure, more money helps, right? But the root of that problem in particular isn't money, it's you need healthier habits.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean that's the whole idea that you're money rich, but your morals poor. Right? So that's exactly that kind of idea. It's like that starts with habits. That's why you may have, some of these professional athletes that blow their money immediately because they had no education in this or they had no background in this. They had nothing. So to spend what they never even had before is like they didn't even know where to go with it. And maybe giving money to people they shouldn't and having huge entourages and doing, things that are extravagant with no ideas of the future. But then again, you then get those, let's say, professional athletes like Shaquille O'Neal or otherwise that then end up, buying Papa John's and they're involved with the general insurance and, this, that, and the other. You look at people like 50 Cent with vitamin water or, whatever it may be, and kind of expanding beyond what they are in. They end up taking their capital and their influence and their platform and then expanding that in much bigger ways. But Shaquille O'Neal, to this point, there's a story about his, I don't know if you know his story, but basically when he first came into the NBA, he got a signing bonus for whatever the amount of money was, like a $500,000 or $1 million. And what did he do? He went down to the car dealership and he bought cars for like all of his family and his friends. And he bought like a mansion and all these things that he had to do in like a weekend. And then he shows up to see like his business manager and is like, "Yeah, I need like a couple $100,000." He's like, "Shaquille, what are you talking about? You're in debt you're in debt like a $500,000." So not only did he spend all the money that he had, he spent the money he didn't have. And he always talks about the fact that that was one of the most important lessons that he learned in finance, that, you have to manage your own funds, you have to manage your habits, you have to manage your spending behaviors, because in the end of the day, that's what's going to make you truly successful and truly financially free.
I think a funny example of this is, and I've often seen this with people that, have money or whatnot, and they'll be very easygoing on certain things like, "Oh, okay, this is a comfort necessity, $3,000." But then if they get charged like five extra dollars on the food tab that wasn't theirs, just like going back to the waiter and like, this isn't right. This $5 too much. And I think that's just a funny example of what we're talking about because it shows priorities too when it
Yes,
comes to money.
sure, sure. No, I'd agree with that for sure.
Hmm. Now, do you have any advice for young entrepreneurs, people getting started? I know we talked a little bit about the shotgun approach and money management, but is there anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, realize that if you are trying to do something entrepreneurial, that a lot of people may not get it, and that you are going to have to be your number one cheerleader every day. your number one advocate. No one is going to give you that spark that is going to make you successful more than yourself. You're going to go home with your successes and your failures every single day, and you're going to have to be okay with that. It's a little bit of a like a lonely path, especially in the beginning stages. Now, you may have others or partners who come into it and share your vision and this, that, and the other. But if it's really your thing that you started, you're always going to feel as though, you're in it alone a little bit. And that's okay. You can take guidance from others. You can get sounding boards and things of that nature. But in the end, you need to do what you feel is right so that you don't feel as though you have any regrets. So it's a bit lonely of a pathway, but you got to stick with it. You have to be your own advocate. You have to, put the wind in your sails when you can. And that's really going to be the way that you're going to be truly successful.
Yeah, that's a big one because not even that long ago, maybe a couple years back, I was in that boat looking for the spark and something else, that missing piece that I need to get started and do these things I want to do. And I don't really know when that transition switched, but maybe it was just the realization that no one's coming to save me and I need to do it myself. But um,
And that's how you
yeah,
learn. And that's
uh-huh.
how you learn too, because I mean, it's learning by doing, right? I could sit here and tell you all these things that you should, but it's until you take these two hands and you start doing something that you get a splinter in this hand and you cut this finger and you do that thing and you trials and the tribulations end up being the backbone of your success, right? And you then understand how to use these hands to make things do things in a way that nobody else could teach you or tell you from the outside, right?
Yeah. What do they say? Idle hands is the devil's playground, right? I think you need enough discomfort to get out of that equilibrium state, right? You
You
need the
do.
pendulum to move.
You do. You absolutely do. And that's essential to your development.
Well, Kareem, I love to ask my guests this closing question. As you know, the show is called Learn or Be Learned. What is one big life lesson that you learned that you'd like to leave the audience with?
Big life lesson that I learned. You can't you can't be afraid to chase your dream. You cannot be afraid to chase your dream. And that is with regards to what may be expected of you, either through your family or through your experiences, your life, your relationships, whatever else it is. You've got this life to live, a ticking clock, as we sort of said. And you really want to make sure that you have a no regrets type of mentality, have a limitless mindset, and go after those dreams, whatever they may be. And that is the way that you will move towards kind of true fulfillment because you feel as though you're moving towards things that really excite you and motivate you.
Would you say that you should keep your dreams private or share them with certain people? Because I've experienced both, the
I
benefits and
think
negatives.
I think it depends upon who you are as a person. I'm a talk it out kind of person, which means that if I have a dream, I'm going to talk about it with people as much as I can whenever I can, because it's through talking about it that I sort of get a sense of like where the dream really sits for me. Like I may have this dream and other people may tell me things, and it doesn't mean that I'm going to take away from the dream that I have because I've heard a negative thing or this. Sometimes it enforces it to say, oh, you know what? All these people say I shouldn't even do it. Now I really want to do
Yeah,
it. So I do think that there's a huge value in talking about it because we as human beings, we're communicative and we want to make connections and we want to discuss with people and we want to relate and connect. And what better way to do that on things that we really care about, things that we dream about, you know?
yeah. And I think it also gives life to the dream, right?
Yeah. When it's tucked away and it's so private and it's all held, it never sees the light of day except for in the corners of your mind. I don't know. I kind of feel like the more you put it out into the world, the more it starts to like almost manifest.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's very interesting because I've had moments where I felt the need to be more private about my big goals or whatever. Maybe out of one, it being too big for the person I'm communicating with or whatever, right? Um, but I think another aspect, which many could probably relate, is this the fear of accountability, right? Is you say I want to be an author, 5 years later, your friend said, "Hey, you ever write that book?" You don't. A lot of us don't want to be put in that uncomfortable position to face it.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying by that, but then it stops being your dream. It starts being the dream that others people or a construct or a perspective of your dream that other people have for you. You saying that you want to be an author, whether it takes 20 years or 1 year, shouldn't make a difference. But when someone else says, "Hey, it's been 5 years, you haven't done it on," why? Because in their mind, a dream that would be successful would be to do it within 5 years. That's not your dream. That's their dream. That's their perspective of your dream. It's not your dream. There's difference there.
Yeah, I like that. Well, thank you so much for coming today on the show and sharing some great wisdom. I really appreciated it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it too. It's a great show and a very thoughtful conversation and great questions. So I do appreciate it.